Hello, so I'm going back to Blender 2.77 Alpha, and I'm going to be showing you how I set up Blender for Unreal Engine 4 exporting. And this is a default setup, so I'm going to go into File, User Preferences. I'm actually going to set the resolution. There we go. That should be a little bit better. So I've enabled large cursor, and I've increased the DPI of my resolution. So I have an NVIDIA GPU, so I'm going to go to CUDA, and I'm going to set it up with my GeForce 750 Ti. I'm going to go GLSL transform feedback. And I think before on my laptop I had to set it up to triple buffer, but I'm just going to leave it to automatic for now. So I'm going to go to Input. Most important thing for me is emulate 3-button mouse, because I like using Control Alt and left mouse button to control how I do different viewport stuff. So first thing, dynamic spacebar. And loop tools. I kind of like having extra objects. And, well, of course, FBX exporter, but that should be enabled by default. Alright, sometimes you might need to enable auto-run Python scripts. And that's it for system settings. So now we can move around. What we're going to do is, I'm going to set this over to Blender Game. Set it to GLSL and under shading. We're going to go into the scene settings. Set it up for a metric. That should be done. I'm also going to set my snapping mode. Just going to set it to enabled, so every time we move it, it snaps. I also like setting it to absolute grid placement. It's based on the pivot point. So every time you move it, it should be snapped to the grid. In theory. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, G and then Z. And I'll just move it over to there. That way our pivot point is always in the corner, which allows you to snap it. So if you were to just move things around, it'd be a lot easier. I'm also going to install HardOps. Let's see here. Add-ons. Install from file. Okay, I'm going to save settings. So now if we select our object and press Q, you can C-sharpen. Also in this version, if you were to create a plane, and just scale that up, you could shift right click, and you could press Q and then split. Of course you could select that again and then split again. Now we have 3 objects. And you can change the width and all the cool stuff. Okay, so I'm going to just join them back together with Control J. One thing I want to mention is if you scale your object, you'll notice that you have a scale offset as well as dimensions. if you're exporting for Unreal Engine, you probably don't want to have it that way. Or as far as I'm concerned, I was taught not to scale the objects, as this would like offset this like ×2. So let's see here. I'm going to press Alt S. I'm going to go into edit mode, and then I'll just set my pivot point to the 3D cursor, and I'll scale it up that way. That way it will be exactly 3 meters in Unreal Engine. I'm actually going to make it. You can hold Shift while scaling. As you can see, it's not exactly accurate. Let's see here. Control Tab, Face, or you can click down here in the toolbar. And just move it, and it should snap because of our absolute grid snapping. It's not entirely accurate at times. Well, let's try duplicating it. For some reason I didn't like... There we go. That's weird. Okay. Anyway, as you can see, it's not perfect at all. For a moment, let's temporarily go into our modifiers tab. We'll disable that. I'm also going to press 5 to go in the orthographic view. I'm going to press Z and then B to box select this. It just does not want to grid snap. Let's see here. We'll set it up to active element and see what happens. We might be on to something there. I'm just going to leave it over here. Quick test. Oh. I guess if something doesn't work, then you just kind of set it up that way, huh? Okay, Z is fine. It's at 4 meters. Set Y 4. And this obviously should be set to 0. Okay. Normally it should just work, but here we go, huh? And now one thing to note, I'm pressing Alt and then D to duplicate my objects. Now if I go into edit mode, and if I move this up, the other objects will follow. Move that back down. And we'll delete these. Now one thing to also note, that if it's duplicated like this, if you press Ctrl A and then try to apply scale, it won't work because the duplicated objects have no idea what it's doing. You have to delete them and then Ctrl A, apply scale. Now, let's get into the export objects. We select the different objects we want. And in this case, we're going to create a cube. I'm going to move it up. Scale tool doesn't seem to snap in older versions of Blender, which is one of the problems I'm facing right now. And everything should be good for that cube. This is going to be our collision shape. Wire. I'll set it up for bounds. Oh, fine. Wire. Okay, anyway, now the important thing is we have to do UCX underscore cube bounds 01. The UCX tells UE4 that this is a collision shape object only and not a shape. Cube bounds is just the name of the object, and then 01 is this is the first collider. If we wanted to have another collision shape, we could make that 02. So then we would have a cube, and then we'd have probably a sphere type collider. At the same time, I don't know, it might end up being more like that whenever it's generated. So you'll have to play around and see what what Unreal Engine can do. So now I'm just going to make sure that the names are the same. Make sure that whenever you're exporting your object, you probably don't want to have auto smooth on, and you probably don't want to have your bevel modifier on. So this is what I would technically call a high poly object. I'm going to stick this over in the second slot. I'm going to move this over to the first layer. And so we have our cube, and we have our collision bounds. This cube I'm going to duplicate with Shift and D, M, and then 1. You can also change your layers there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove those. I'm going to go over here, disable auto smooth. So you want those to be smooth objects. And what you'd end up doing is you'd end up unwrapping them. I'm just going to select everything. I'm going to press U, and then Smart UV Project. I'm going to type in 20, 0.2, and 0.2. And if you're clever, you can select these and do them both at the same time. So I've just unwrapped them. Whenever you have your mouse cursor over in the top, you can create and make more of these windows. So down here, we're going to go into UV Image Editor. It unwrapped pretty good. So I think that would be our low poly object. And for our shape, we don't need that. But we'll type in low. The underscore low tells Substance Painter that this is a low poly object. Just going to copy that, paste it in. And you probably wouldn't export the low poly with the collision. That also being said, it might work anyway. And over here, we'll just say cube bounds. Now the high poly object does not need a material, although you can set it up with ID blue and ID red and continue on. And then you just set your color to blue. Set this over to a red. And then what you could do is unselect everything. You can press L to select common objects, unless of course they have seams. Then you won't be able to select everything, so you'd probably want to switch over to Control Tab Vertex, and then you'd press L on that, and it would select everything connected. So I'm just going to assign red to that. So you can generate the ID maps using materials, but at the same time, you can go into Vertex Paint, and we'll just enable that. This allows you to go into edit mode, and then selecting whichever object you want. And then you can change your color to like green. And since this is enabled, anything we have selected will be what we can paint onto. But I go to Paint, and then Set Vertex Colors, or Shift K. So now we have green, and red and blue. Oops. Let's go back in object mode. And this will be an interesting experiment. A high poly object does not need UV maps or materials. Technically, you can do everything with vertex colors. It helps save on the exported file size. Now comes to the fun part of exporting. We're going to go to File, Export, FBX. And what I do is I click on Selected Objects. We're going to leave that alone. We want Experimental. Leave it on Binary for now. I'm going to Shift left click on Camera and Lamp. I don't need them. Technically this object doesn't have armatures, so I don't need that either. I guess we're going to go with edge smoothing. And we're going to leave that as is. We're going to click on this plus and just name it UE4. Click OK. And we have our preset. So we're going to create our cube 1, and I like to have a textures folder in there, but that's okay. And cube 1 high, there's the underscore convention, and export. Of course, I didn't name the high poly object. I'm going to copy the low and rename it to high. Export again. File, Export, FBX. Double click. Then I'm going to select the bounds and the object. Export. Low. And I'm just going to hide that. Go into Substance Painter. Go into File, New. Select our template. It will be Unreal Engine 4 Algorithmic. I'm going to set it to OpenGL because I'm on Linux. I'm going to go to Desktop. I'm going to select our low cube. and click OK. So currently I'm it's complaining about the no UVs of the object. So what I'm going to end up doing here is I'm just going to select both of my objects, press Control D, and I'm going to press it over on 3. So this is going to be just our game model. Alright, go over here, we're going to delete that, and it's just going to be low. There we go. Shift right click to select. And now we'll go over here. Now, Alt and left mouse button will allow you to rotate. Alt and right mouse button allows you to zoom in. Control, Alt, and left mouse button to pan around. Now, we're going to go to Texture Sets. We're going to click this Channels and Plus button. Going to enable emissive. And specular. Then we'll scroll down to Mesh Maps and Bake Mesh Maps. We're going to go into High Definition Meshes. Click on this little file icon. We'll select our high object. We're going to go into Anti-Aliasing. Go to Subsampling 4x4. If you have multiple objects, you're going to want to set this to by mesh name. And here you can see the high poly object has an underscore high and an underscore low. If you go into ambient occlusion, you can also set that to only say mesh name, as well as thickness. If you go back to common, ignore backfaces might be a good setting to uncheck. Then we'll just click on Bake Cube Bounds Mesh Maps. Alright, as you can see, the bakes have completed. If you hold Shift and right mouse button, you can move the lighting around or rotate the lighting. Now we're going to click up here and scroll down to our ID map. Now as you can see, it took our vertex colors instead of our materials. If you wanted to change that, you click on ID and you could change it to material color. Then it would have baked out the other colors. You can also select none, then just bake out the ID. And as you can see, that took the other ID map into consideration. So we can press M, and it will go back to the material view. I'm going to click on Layers, and down here in our shelf, we have our different materials. And you can left mouse click on the folder icon and it'll make it full screen. So if we wanted concrete, well, then there would be concrete. And what I would do is I would create a folder, and you can left click and drag that into it. You can right click on the folder and you can create a, oh wow, they added something new. Add mask with height combination. I'll have to play around with that later. Add mask with color selection is what we're going to do. Click into properties, and pick a color. And as you can see, it will only go around there. So if we create another folder, we'll grab something unique. And mask color selection, properties, select the red. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Then for fun, I'm going to left click on the material, go to UV, and they added more stuff. That was awesome. I'm gonna a few more things to play around with. Normally it's triplanar projection. As you can see, the texture repeats depending on where you move the texture to. And of course you can set the rotation as well as the hardness, which is how much it blurs the edges in order to make it look seamless. Normally want to keep that fairly high. Yeah. So let's see here. Oh, we've got some more stuff. Crop to shape or extends outside shape. Oh, wow. Oh. That's cool. Well, that might help out later. These are new features that are in the newest version of Substance Painter right now. Okay, anyway. We'll just do that. Let's see what the planar projection is. Okay, so it's projecting just along an axis, I guess. Okay. And let's see here. Spherical projection. Oh, that's cool. Okay. And let's see here. I'm going to create another folder. I'm going to stick both of these materials into it. And let's see here. I'm trying to think. I mean, we'll do this. We'll add a white mask. I'm going to right click on the mask and add a generator. Oh, you can compare masks now. That's a cool thing. Oh, okay, let's see here. And let's go with dirt. Okay, now we won't be able to see much here, so let's add a paint layer. I'm going to make this a black color. As you can see, our generator is kind of fading out based on a texture or an algorithm. You can set the dirt contrast. You can even invert it. A little difficult to tell with this generator. What I want to do is I want to create a, let's see here, metal edgeware. This will be easier to tell what it's doing. So as you can tell, the edgeware currently is only showing the edges. So if we invert it, it will cut into the edges. So I'll change this to something like red. As you can see, the lower material is what's showing through now. Usually you want it to be like a white or a grayish color. Of course, you might want to have a gold or some other, maybe a darker metal up there. Now let's see here. We don't need a emissive on that. Now that being said, if we had a emissive and we change this up to a white, and we'll probably want this. Let's see here. Let's give this material emissive override. Well, maybe not. Okay. We'll just add a layer here then. Throw it into our main folder. We just want this to be an emissive override. There. And that won't be emissive. And you can double click to rename the layers. We will call this background. And we can delete that layer. Also delete that as well. Oh, never mind. Okay, never mind. Material background. I'm confused. Let's see here. We'll just call this one materials. And if we go over here to the top right, under display settings, and you can click on the camera, I'm going to activate post effects. And what we're going to do is give it a glare. I'm going to set this to bloom. And let's see here. That should be. Well, currently the effect isn't showing. Okay. I wonder if that's because my project is in. Yeah, let's see here. We'll try OpenGL and see if that changes. Well, maybe it's not working. It's not working. Oh well. Normally you'd be able to enable the bloom so you could actually see what different things are doing, but it's not working. Anyway, you would have been seeing like a little bit of a glow around the object, but we'll see it in Unreal Engine, so that's not really a problem. I'm going to change that back to DirectX because it seems to look probably more like it would look in Substance. One thing that I've been doing lately is I'm going to add a fill layer. I'm going to disable everything but roughness. If I set this to 0.6, it's going to make everything kind of a uniform roughness. But anyway, we're going to go to File, Export Textures, and we are going to use the Unreal Engine 4, but I'm going to duplicate it and change a few settings. So we're going to take Unreal Engine 4 Packed, and then what you do is you would click this duplicate icon, and then you would rename it to whatever you want to call it. And then I'm going to erase the first part here, which would be the mesh part, because we don't want the mesh name and then the texture name, because that's just weird. So now everything should work. Now one thing I've also done is I've created a texture spec. So what we would end up doing is that it's a grayscale. So we'd end up clicking on gray, just paste that in, and then this area is where our specular is going to be from gray channel. So that's all set up. I'm going to delete this because I've already got my setup here. Now as you can see, cube bounds, which was our material name, and then base color, occlusion, roughness, metallic, normal, emission, and spec. One thing I've also done was I changed it up. So I made it work better with Unreal Engine's node setup. So I grabbed the metallic channel, I pasted it there, and from gray channel, then we have roughness. So I took the roughness, I stuck it in the middle from gray channel, and then we have occlusion. So ambient occlusion, drag that in from gray channel. So that's the only real difference. So if you have to change it and then select it. Now we will click on our path, which was our desktop for this setup, and just in textures, sometimes you can create a one or name it based on what you want to call it, just in case you have multiple different textures. Currently we have it set to 2048, so I'm just going to export that. Then of course you can always save as, and go over to our desktop, cube, substance, saves, and then cube 1. 001. So that's saved. That will eat up quite a few gigabytes if you have a complex scene, so just be warned. So I'm going to close Substance, and I'm going to open up Unreal Engine 4. And this part will take a while, so I'm going to copy over my desktop files, which will be the cube 1, which has our collisions and our textures. Go over to our documents, content, and I always create a My Assets or Assets folder. We'll just create test models. Cube 1. We'll just paste in our textures, so we'll be ready for it. Alright, now that we have Unreal Engine 4 open, it'll ask you to import. Let me do that again. 7 changes to source content files have been detected, and I'm going to click on Import. Then it will ask you all of these questions. Let's see here. We're going to uncheck auto-generated collisions. And as far as I'm concerned, that's all that I'm going to do. And just import all. I don't know what that is. Alright. And then I have a scene set up. Okay. So move my player. Around here, and then we're going to search up cube. And there's our cube 1. Just going to drag it and drop it into the scene. As you can see, it is a big object. And I'm just going to double click on the materials. And one thing I'm going to do here here. I should probably navigate to where the files are at. My assets, and test models, cube 1, textures. You know what? The textures didn't seem to export. Weird. Click on import. Huh. And for some reason my textures aren't importing. Go figure. Of course I can't do that, huh? Oh, that's weird. Probably gonna end up crashing Unreal Engine at this point. There we go. Alright. Let's delete that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all these objects and I'm going to drag it onto my material here. So we're going to take the RGB value of our base color, stick it into base color. As you can see, our sphere object has updated. There. Now this object is our occlusion, roughness, and metallic. So you got metallic, roughness, and ambient occlusion. Yep, as you can see, our base concrete isn't very reflective, but our metal object was. So let's see here. Oh yeah, and this is our emissive channel, so we want to take that and emissive color. I guess it's bright. Should probably change the color though. And this would be our normal map. I probably shouldn't have adjusted the concrete's roughness. Oops. Anyway. Specular. I know things are kind of spaghetti here, but that's the object. So we're going to click on Save. And once this is done, we're going to close it. Now, as you can see, our object works. So I'm just going to click on Play. Maybe make the window a little bigger. As you can see, our origin is in the center point, or on the corner. And as you can see, we're colliding with it. Try moving it down and see if we can't jump on it. And there we go. We are standing on it. As you'll notice, our feet are kind of sticking through it a little bit, or sinking into the object. But our materials are working great. So what we have to do is we're going to select our collision shape. And I'm just going to select everything, and I'm going to press Alt and S. This will scale the object bounds up. We're going to hold Shift. We only want it to be just a hair off of it. Select all of that. Export, FBX. Make sure we have our UE4, Cube 1, export. And we want to go to Desktop. Cube 1, copy, and overwrite. Actually, we might want to scale down our objects. And remember what I said, we don't want to have our scale wonky, so we're going to press Ctrl A and scale. Just to keep our sanity if anything weird happens on export. Smooth that down a bit. So now, as you can see, our feet are not sticking into the floor here, and our materials are working perfectly. Let's see here. If you wanted to create something more, I mean, you could probably create another object here, and then you could, let's see here, smooth shade it, and then you could create another bounds box, or just duplicate that and stick it over. And there you go, you'd have your collision and your object. Of course, you have to rename that to 2. Just a quick side tip over here. Let's see here. I have 2 planes here. I have my mode set to vertex, and if you press Ctrl B and try to bevel, you won't be able to. If you hold Ctrl Shift B, you can bevel the corners there, and you can always adjust it here. And then of course you could press L, and then press I to inset, and press I again, and you'd have a little corridor or something. But anyway, it's just something to keep in mind. Same thing goes with the cube. Press Ctrl B and you can bevel it like that. Press Ctrl Shift B and it will only bevel the corners. Or the vertex. Anyway, thank you for watching. Unreal Engine 4 has crashed, so I don't want to go through the process of reopening it again for this tutorial. And yeah, have a good day.